How's everybody doing this morning? Are you really that excited? Come on, it's Thanksgiving week, man. Turkey time, okay. How many of you are ready for Thanksgiving? You've got your turkey, it's thawing in the fridge already. You're like, you have to thaw it already? Yeah, you got to get started. Leah and I are learning how to do a turkey because we're going to make our first turkey this year. By us, I mean her, and I'm going to eat it. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be awesome. And so, we're getting ready for Thanksgiving. Isn't Thanksgiving a great time for family and friends and kind of connection? I brought this table up here to kind of help us think about Thanksgiving a little bit. Is that cool with you guys? Okay. So around this table, we're gonna put friends and family around. And how many of you have like a little bit of a crazy family? Little bit, yeah. How about you? You put the fun in dysfunction, right? Like that's your family. Okay, my family's a little crazy, a little different. But you know what? We can come to expect a couple of things around the table, right? One of those things is love, isn't it? Like I may not like these people all the time, but dang, I love them, all right? There's love. There's this genuine sense of we're a family, we're going to love each other, and it's great to have that reminder each Thanksgiving. But how many also know sometimes there's conflict around that table? You ever get in a fight on Thanksgiving, or anybody in your family get in a fight before? No, you guys are too perfect to have that happen. Yeah, not you guys, right? Someone else's family that you heard about one time, that happened. But sometimes there's conflict, right? Sometimes there's disagreements. Sometimes there's people at your table that don't think like you think. You ever been there? You have that family member that doesn't believe the same thing you believe. Maybe it's a political thing. Maybe it's a church thing. Maybe it's a God thing. But whatever it is, there's a little bit different. There can be conflict. Sometimes there's confusion around the table. You ever, like, when you first started dating someone, or you first got married, and you went to the in-laws' house for the first time for Thanksgiving, you're like, this is so confusing. We don't do it like this at all at my house. Like maybe your family is really quiet and reserved, and you each say what you're thankful for at different times. And then there's the family that's like, if everybody's not talking, something's weird. Just like loud all the time. That's kind of how I grew up, just loud people. Not me, I'm quiet. My family is loud. Okay. So there's confusion. Sometimes there's frustration. You ever been frustrated on Thanksgiving? The late people, right? Like you want to call that. You got the late person in your family, right? Maybe you are the late person in your family. I got a lot of late people in my family, and somehow on Thanksgiving they're the ones bringing the plates, right? Like every single time, and you're like, come on, man, we want to eat, but we have turkey, we have everything but something to put our food on. What's wrong? Next time we're telling them Thanksgiving breakfast. That's what we're going to do. We're going to eat at the table. You show up 10 a.m., all right? Maybe they'll make it by noon. So, so there's frustration. But at the end of the day, here's my favorite part about the family. There's a connection there. There's a connection. Like we don't always get along. We don't always have all the same things in common, but once a year, we're going to have a family connection. You know what I'm talking about? And it all started a long time ago when great-grandma and great-grandpa started having babies, right? And it started to create our family tree, and it branched out. And now we're pulling the family back together, and we're marrying new people in, or we've got friends coming into the family. But at the end of the day, there's a bloodline there, and there's a connection there. There's a connection that we have. And you know what? I think about Thanksgiving table a lot of times, and I think about our church at the same time. Because in the Bible, we're referred to as a family of believers, right? Did you ever read that? We're a family. And the same things that are happening at your table this Thursday on Thanksgiving are some of the same things that happen here at the shore. So the same family here. Like there's love at this table with your family. There's love here at this church for each other. I've been in this series. We've been in this series. I Love My Church series. This is the fourth week in this series. And I got to tell you, I love my church because there's love here. There's love here. Like someone struggles, maybe they're sick. Their family steps in and helps them out, providing meals, cleaning houses. It's been incredible to see people do that. Their small group family steps up. Financial needs, people are stepping in and helping one another. They're not calling TJ and going, TJ, this person's got a problem. You really need to do something about it. They're going, no, I'm the family. I love them. There's love at the table at the shore, and I'm gonna go do that, right? Sometimes there's conflict here, right? Yeah. If you have never had conflict in church before, it just means you haven't been to church long enough, okay? Because there's people here. People have conflict. But at the end of the day, don't we know that there's the relationship's more important than the conflict? than being right? The other day, I was at my mom's house, and she showed me a letter that she got like in her mailbox, and it was just like a piece of paper folded in half, and it was printed really big. It's like, don't go to such and such church. It's a church full of gossips and slanderers. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, this person would fit in there, though. Like, you know what I'm talking about? You know, like think about it for a second. Like, they're gossiping and slandering about a church that gossips and slanders, so I think you found your family, bro. Like, you belong there. Like, just fold it up, put it back in your hand. You need to go back. You know what I'm talking about? Like that happens, right? If you're around church long enough, is there going to be a conflict? Is there going to be someone that thinks differently than you? Yes. It's happened in your own family. It's happened in your workplace. Why wouldn't it happen here? Because people are people, aren't they? There's going to be a conflict of some sort at some time. But you can work through it, okay? What about frustration? You ever been frustrated with people, your family here in the church? Like they may not be late, but they may not be late to Thanksgiving dinner, but they're late to church, and you're sitting on the end aisle. I know I'm an end aisle person, right? Like I like to be able to stretch my leg out the side. You know what I'm talking about? I like to do one of those. And then here comes the late person. They walk in and they go, excuse me, and they like shuffle into your row, right? And they sit down, and you're like, oh my, I gotta move, turn side. You do the move like this, and they sit down, and then what happens? I didn't get my drink. Excuse me. I got to go back over to get my, excuse me. And then they go back there, and then they come back, and they're going back over here again, and they sit down, and they go, now I have to go to the bathroom. Oh, my gosh. And I'm like 3/4 of the way through the sermon, and you're thinking, are they 10? Are they 10? You're frustrated, aren't you? You're like, no, not me. No, I'm not. That's never happened to you before? Never, not once. Okay, that's fine. But sometimes we get frustrated with people in church. Sometimes there's a confusion. Maybe it's your first time here, and you're like, what is this guy talking about? Why did all those people have questions while we did worship during the songs? Like, that guy's got 2 questions. What is he talking about? There was confusion, okay? You didn't know, you're like, what are they doing? Or I heard this once, a pastor said this. Someone asked them, why do people moo in your church? It's like, what? Why do people, It's like when you say something good, they go, it's like, I'm like, well, that's like, they can't say amen because they're too embarrassed. So they're like, that's good. There's some confusion that happens every once in a while, right? But at the end of the day, what I love about the Thanksgiving table is what I love about this church, is that there's a connection here. And it's a connection with one another, but there's also this connection with God that He's given us. A beautiful connection. You see, in our family, it started with a bloodline. And the tree started to branch and it worked its way down. In our church, it starts with a bloodline too, where Jesus Christ laid down His life for us, sacrificed His life for us, so we could be adopted into God's family. There's a bloodline and there's a connection there. There's a beautiful connection there. And so this morning, can we kind of talk a little bit about the table and how there's room for all of us at God's table, at Jesus' table? Did you know that Jesus had a table in a meal one time? And who do you think would be invited to Jesus' table? Like, think about that. Like, this is Jesus. Like supernatural, walk on water, Son of God, raise the dead, heal the blind, heal the lame, just that kind of Jesus. Who gets to sit with that guy at the table? Have you ever thought of that before? In the Jewish tradition, there's this feast called Passover. And Passover is when they remembered or they were thankful for what God did for the Israelites, the Jewish people. Kind of like we are thankful for what God has given us, right, on Thanksgiving. This happened in the spring, ours happens in the fall, but it's the same kind of thing. Jesus was about to sit down at a table with some people for His Thanksgiving sort of a meal. Who is at the table? Now, the myth would say, hey, you have to be pretty successful to sit with Jesus. You have to be pretty important to be at Jesus' table, right? Like, you have to have a great relationship with Him. You have to be perfect. You have to be set apart. You have to live your life, a really, really holy life to sit with Jesus. But that's a myth. Look what it says, Matthew chapter 26. Let me just kind of read a little bit. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, where do you want us to to make preparations for you to eat Passover? The Passover meal. This is their Thanksgiving meal. He replied, go into the city and find a certain man and tell him, the teacher says, the appointed time is near. I'm going to celebrate Passover with my disciples at your house. And he continues. So the disciples did as Jesus directed them and prepared the Passover. When the evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12, the 12. Those are the people that were invited to Jesus' table, the 12. Well, who are these 12? They must be 12 amazing guys. In fact, they were the 12 disciples. And if you don't know much about the disciples, you would just automatically assume that these disciples are some pretty holy dudes, right? They're pretty important. They spent 3 years with Jesus. So who are these 12? Well, in Matthew chapter 10, we get a list of who the 12 are, like who these 12 disciples are. So check it out. Matthew chapter 10 says this. Here are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also called Peter. And now, I know you know who Peter is. He's the guy that walked on water. He's the guy that's in like every joke that it's like, hey, 2 guys died and Peter meets him at the gate. That's Peter. That's this Peter, okay? And then Andrew, who is Peter's brother. James, the son of Zebedee. John, James's brother. Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas. We know Thomas. He's known as Doubting Thomas. The next part of the list says this. Matthew, the tax collector. Matthew's the first guy. We kind of get a description of what he did. James, the son of Alphaeus. Thaddeus. Simon the Zealot. He's another description. Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. And so we get another description there with Judas. Now, you would think that this list of guys was a very, very important list of guys. But the truth is, they were not perfect. They were not successful spiritually all the time. Just like I'm not successfully spiritual all the time. And just like you. Like, you ever have one of those unsuccessful spiritual moments? Like, I don't know, you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off? I got some mms on that one. Good mooing. I got it, okay. What about when your cell call drops? You guys know that doesn't frustrate you at all, right? Like, no problem. What about when holiday season and you go into Walmart? No, say I don't know. You finding a parking spot, waiting through. I mean, you could go through the list of things, right? That you're kind of like, people everywhere. Maybe even coming in here today, parking and walking. You were like, I don't know if I could do this. Listen. All of us have these moments where we are spiritually kind of unsuccessful, where we kind of fall short of what we really want to be. But the truth is, we don't need to be perfect to sit at Jesus' table. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be spiritually successful. It doesn't matter how holy you are, you still get to talk to the Creator and the Son of God, Jesus Christ. That's pretty cool, right? We still get to have a relationship with Him. In fact, I'm going to highlight 4 guys from this list of 12 and talk to you kind of who was at Jesus' table. And maybe you can identify with one or all 4 of these guys. Because at the end of the day, here's the truth that I want us all to know. There's room for you at the table. There's room for you at Jesus' table. There's room for you to have fellowship and relationship with Him. Because you don't need to be spiritually perfect. You don't have to have everything together. Because listen, none of us do. Some of us are just really good at faking it. But we don't have it all together. In fact, let me pull up the first name. His name is Matthew. Matthew the tax collector. Now, I taught about him a couple of weeks ago. And Matthew the tax collector, you can go back, listen to the message. It's in this series. But I want to kind of highlight a couple things about Matthew. Matthew was at Jesus' table for the Passover feast. But where did his relationship with Jesus start? Jesus was a tax collector. He was sitting in his tax collecting booth. Jesus walks up to him and he says, "Follow me." He leaves everything and he follows him. Well, what this story doesn't really tell us is kind of the background of all of this. You see, a tax collector was one of the wealthiest guys in the city. He was very rich. And so the reason he got rich, though, is because when the Romans came in to rule the Jewish people, they left the Jewish people and kind of sided with the Romans and began to tax the Jewish people, give money to the Romans, and keep all the extra for themselves. So they were very rich, but they were also very hated by the Jewish people because they were betrayers. And Jesus walks up to this man who is just totally outcast from society. In fact, in their society, they would say there were sinners, and then below them was like the tax collectors. And the sinners are going, at least I'm not a tax collector, you know what I'm saying? And so that's the kind of attitude they had. And Jesus walks up to him and he says, "Hey, follow me." Didn't tell him to stop collecting taxes, didn't tell him to stop anything, leave his friends. He says, "Hey, come follow me." Why did Matthew follow him? Because Jesus had something that Matthew couldn't get with his stuff. I think sometimes we think of the disciples as kind of like knuckleheads sometimes. We're like, they don't know nothing, they were poor, they were broke, they didn't have anything else going for them. No, Matthew's one of the richest guys around. On the outside, he had it all together. He had friends, he had parties, he had all the riches he needed in life. But he didn't have one thing. He looked right on the outside, but inside there was something missing. And when Jesus said, hey, come follow me, he goes, that's what I've been missing. And maybe you can identify with this guy, Matthew. Like on the outside, you kind of look like you kind of have it all together, and you're really good at kind of faking it. Listen, if there's something missing on the inside, there's still room at Jesus' table for you. Because I can get really good at faking it. I know you can too, right? Because here's what we say. We ask each other, how you doing? Good, right? Every time. Good, good. We're not honest. We just fake it, right? The truth is we can be honest with him. And if there's a part of us that's missing, that spiritual side of us that's lacking, he goes, you know what? This is for you. Come on in. There's room at the table for you. The second guy on the list is Simon. And Simon, he's a zealot, okay? Okay, a zealous person. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you ever met a zealous person? Like, okay, let's think politics. A person that, like, they're hardcore Republican or hardcore Democrat. They're very, very zealous, right? Who else is zealous? Climate change people, right? I'm not making fun of them, not one way or the other, but they are zealous. They are a zealous group of people. Cat people, like all the time, just sharing those suckers all over Facebook, cat people. But the most zealous group of people I have ever met in my entire life are the Android people. Yeah. See, I have an iPhone. I got my new iPhone 6 this week, okay? And I like it, okay? I do. And here's the problem. Now that I've said I like my iPhone, the Android people will come after me. I didn't say you need to get one. I said I like mine. And they'll say things like, oh, you're just being a sheep, following the ways of the apple. And I'm like, I just like it, like whatever. Or they go, hey, I hope you enjoy that technology that we invented 2 years ago. I'm like, thanks. I don't know. I just like my iPad. I have an iPad too. Oh no. Oh, and at the door, I'll have 10 people go, but Android's better, but Android's better. And I'm like, I didn't tell you Android wasn't better. I just said I like my iPhone. That's all I said, but these are zealous people, okay? I have a friend who had an Android phone, right? And he was all about Android and whatever. Then, don't tell anybody, he bought an iPhone, okay? And the zealots over here were like, how could you betray us? And he's like, sorry, right? And there were friends that would not talk to him because he got the wrong phone. You tax collector, iPhone guy, right? I feared for his life, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to even say his name because you might kill him later, okay? Listen, it's just a phone, right? Does it make calls and text messages? Great, that's all that matters, right? But there's some zealous people out there. This guy, Simon, was one of those, like, hardcore kind of people. You know what I'm talking about? They are in all the way. But what was he zealous about? He was zealous about the Jewish people. You see, the Romans had come in and ruled over them and put idols up in faces of Caesar. They taxed the people. They took away Jewish tradition. They were inhabiting the people and taking over. And he wanted his goal, one of Simon's goals would have been to overthrow the Roman government, like just get them out of town. And so you could imagine how his hate and disgust grew for the Roman people, right? But do you know who else he would have hated? The tax collectors. And here's Jesus at the table with Matthew, the tax collector, and Simon, the zealot. Could you imagine some of those conversations that were happening around the table? Like some of the things that were kind of, that person doesn't agree with me, and they're pointing fingers and yelling. You remember the one time, the story where the Pharisees came to Jesus, and they said, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And of course, Matthew would have an opinion on that, and so would Simon. And Jesus says, well, give me a coin. Whose name and inscription are on this coin? And they said, well, it's Caesar's name and Caesar's inscription on this coin. And Jesus just says, hey, give to God what is God's, and give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And you could imagine the tension that was probably there. Or when Jesus was teaching, hey, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew, Simon, make you sit in a corner and love your enemies until you hug it out, right? I don't know, he's just teaching them. And you can imagine the pain that kind of was happening, some of the conflict, some of the frustration, just between these two guys, not even to mention the other 10 disciples, just these two. But yet there was still room for both of them at Jesus' table. Because for a while in their life, they begin to realize, listen, I don't need to focus on the things that divide us, but focus on the things that unite us. And our church, our goal is to be the same way. I don't really want to focus on the things that tend to separate us, but on the things that bring us together. And the one person that brings us together is Jesus. It's his table. Does that make sense? And so today when we walk in, you may be like Simon. And maybe it's not a disagreement that you have with someone else, but they just straight up hurt you. They may not even know that they hurt you, but they hurt you. But it's not their table. And you may be in church right now going, I can't believe I'm here. And it's bringing back a flood of memories of pain that's occurred in your life. And someone said something to you. Listen, they're not Jesus. It's not their table. It's his table. And he's the person that unites us. You may identify with Simon. Listen, I've been there. I've been hurt by Christians. But I've never been hurt by the guy who owns the table. And that's Jesus. Third guy I want to talk to you about is Judas. Now, Judas, he's the one that betrayed Jesus. In fact, before this meal that they're about to eat at the table, Judas sneaks away and he talks to the people that he's going to betray Jesus to. Kind of an interesting side fact. The disciples are like, where do you want us to prepare the meal? And Judas is looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. And so Jesus just goes, walk into the city, talk to a guy, and he'll show you a room. So Judas, when he betrays Jesus, is going to go, I don't know where he's going to be. Jesus did like a Jedi mind trick on me. I don't even know where he's going to be. And so he goes and he talks to them. Then he follows Jesus to the upper room. They have their meal. And as they come down, they go to pray in the garden. And then he goes, gets them, and betrays Jesus at that time. Judas, though, here's his story. Judas, we often think of him as the dummy of the group, right? Like, honestly. Like, who betrays Jesus? Come on, dummy, right? But the opposite is probably actually the truth. You see, Judas was the treasurer or the money keeper for all 12 of the disciples and Jesus. Think about it. You don't trust your money to the dummy of the group, right? Like somebody who failed math class, you're not going to go, here, watch the money for all of us, please. If like the 7 dwarfs were your disciples, you're not going to go, hey, dopey, come here. I got a bag of gold, and I want you to take care of it, right? It just does not compute, right? It doesn't happen. So, in fact, Judas was probably one of the smarter guys of the group. Think about that for a minute. Matthew, the tax collector, one of the richest guys in the city, smarter than him. Peter, James, John, business owners. They had their fishing business, multiple boats. They were probably fairly wealthy for their region as well. But out of all of these guys, who's the wealthiest or who's the smartest? They chose Judas. And so he's not like he was some dummy, but here's the problem that Judas encountered. He walked with Jesus for 3 years, and he knew Jesus. He knew about Jesus, but he never surrendered his life to Jesus. Does that make sense? There was a disconnect in there. And we've been talking about this connection with our family, this connection with each other as a body of believers here. And at that table, Judas said all the right things, but his heart was not in it. I don't know about you. It's hard to identify yourself with Judas, but when you put it in that way, you can go, okay, I can see that. How I've kind of been going through the motions. I show up on Sundays. I go to a small group. I give money. I give my time to the poor. I work hard. I go through the motions, but there's still something missing. Maybe we are like Judas sometimes. Maybe we're not going to betray Jesus, but there are times where we're walking with Jesus, but we're not really with Jesus. We've not surrendered our life to him. And that's what happened in Judas's life. He walked with Jesus, but his heart was never in it. The Bible says that as Judas was, as the money keeper, he would take a little for himself every once in a while. He had a character issue. The Bible says you can't serve both God and money. He was serving money and not serving God. He knew everything, but his heart wasn't there. The fourth person we're going to talk about is Thomas. Thomas became known as the doubter. Have you ever heard that before? Doubting Thomas. You're just doubting Thomas, man. Right? Like, you ever hear that one? Okay. I grew up in church, so I kind of hear all these phrases. Thomas the doubter. Now, Thomas didn't start out probably as a doubter. He was following Jesus, left his old life behind to follow Jesus. So he didn't start as a doubter, but he eventually became known as that. And I think he gets a bad rep. But look at John chapter 20. This is where the story really starts to develop with Thomas the doubter. After Jesus was betrayed in the garden, he was whipped, beaten, nailed to a cross, died, buried, and then he rose again. And then he appeared to his disciples, and this is the story that happens when he appears to his disciples. So, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, I think they would probably call him Diddy for short. And since he's Thomas, it would be like T. Diddy, which would be even more fun. That's really good, I know. All right, he was one of the 12 who was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So he was one of the 12, but he had to go do something, and Jesus appears. And so the other disciples told Thomas, "We have seen the Lord." We see, he appeared here. And Thomas goes, "I doubt it." Right? Essentially, he's like, I doubt it. No, he's dead, guys. No, we saw him. He was here. We saw him. And then listen to his response when he says, "We have seen the Lord." He says this, "But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side," because Jesus was stabbed with a spear in the side, "I will not believe. These are my conditions for believing what you say." This is how it's going to go down. I love how the next verse starts. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Diddy was with them this time, okay? "Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.'" Doors locked, he appears. First thing he's going to have to say is like, "Calm down," all right? Chill out, all right? "Peace be with you." And then like a good movie script, he turns to Thomas and it's like, "We've got some unfinished business, bro." Listen to what it says next. "And he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side.'" And then I love this. These are 4 words that could change your life forever. Stop doubting and believe. And I don't think Jesus was chastising Thomas for not believing, but in fact, he was meeting Thomas right where he was and solving his doubt for him right there. Thomas is like, "I've got to see it." And Jesus goes, "See. Go ahead. Now that you've seen, though, it's time to start believing. You can stop doubting now because I've met you right where you are. And you can move on with your life. You can move on as a person who's believing, not just doubting, but believing." And Thomas said to him, this is the next line, Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." He goes, "Yes, it's really you. My eyes have seen, my doubt is gone. I believe." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed." But then he finishes it with this one line, and I think this is the line really that Jesus intended for us to read, for us to hear. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." He's saying, Thomas, you believed because you saw the hands, you saw the side, you saw me here. But there's going to be generations of people that they're not going to have the opportunity to stand in this room with me right now, but they're going to believe. And it's going to be a blessing in their life. Blessed are those who are believing without seeing. And I think some of us today, we walked into here today like Thomas. You're like, I came to church to get someone off my back because they've been inviting me, and they said they'd take me to Chili's, and so I'm here. All right, that's it. And you may be going, I doubt it, but okay, TJ, keep talking. I'm hungry, right? That may be you. But listen, just because you're not pursuing him doesn't mean he's not pursuing you. And just because you're full of doubt doesn't mean he's not going to meet you right where you are, even though you are full of doubt. He did with Thomas. He did with me. I have a friend who told me his story. Just kind of talking to him about how you became a Christian. He was raised in church, but through his 20s, he kind of took a left turn, right? Anybody else do that? You just kind of leave church, leave God, leave everything kind of behind. And life wasn't working out so well. Struggling, brokenhearted, didn't see it, had a lot of doubt. And his brother, who had recently become a Christian, said, hey, bro, just here's a Bible, read it. It'll help. And he's all like, I doubt it. He was Thomas in that moment. And as time goes on, his brother's like, come on, man. God's going to work in your life. God's got to work in your life. He's got something for you. He's going to meet you right where you are. You have doubts, but it's okay. Just start reading this word. It'll get in your heart. And finally, just to shut his brother up, he took the Bible and he took a walk and he started to read. And page by page that went by, his doubt began to decrease. He began to have faith, and he began to believe once again. And in that moment, his situation did not change, but he did. His situation didn't change, but he did. And that was enough of Jesus showing his hands and his side to him in that moment to go, you know what? I do believe. And his life began to change from that point on. He began to follow God, began to trust in his word. And he's begun to grow and grow and grow into this incredible man of God, honestly. And the same is true for you. You may be walking in with your doubts right now. You may be doubting. I get it. Listen, I get it. I have my doubts too. I have my moments where I look up, I'm like, God, why? Why? Seriously? But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop believing just because I have a doubt or two. Because he's bigger than my doubts. And I know in time, he's going to walk me through this life. And he's going to meet me right where I am in every doubt, every time. And we're going to walk hand in hand through this life together. Because at his table, there's room for doubters, like Thomas, and like me, and like you. And there's room for guys like Judas, who just went through the motions, kind of fake it till he make it, kind of person, right? Was near but not changing. There's room at the table for guys like Simon, who didn't agree with everything, but at the same time, Jesus says, I'm the owner of the table, man. Don't worry about what Matthew says or what anybody else says. Focus on me. Then there's guys like Matthew who look good on the outside, but on the inside there's something off. And Jesus is meeting him right where he is. I don't know who you identify with today at the table. Could be one of them, could be all four of them. I know at moments in my life I've been all four of these guys, sitting at the table. But the good news is at the end of the day, it's not my table, it's not their table, it's not your table, it's his. He's the center of it all. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take a moment and just pray a very simple prayer with you. One that says, Jesus, it's your table and I'm going to give everything I am to you. Help remove my doubt, like Thomas. Help me to surrender my whole life to you, like Judas didn't do. Help me not to be offended or hurt by the people around me and let that dwell within my heart like Simon or like Matthew. Jesus, there's been a piece missing. And today I know that piece is you, and I need that in my life. That's the prayer we're going to pray. Very simple, just like the four guys. If you wouldn't mind, maybe closing your eyes, bowing your heads with me. It's going to be, again, simple prayer. No magic in the words, but Jesus knows your heart. And so why don't you take a moment now to pray this with me. You can pray it quietly where you are. You don't even have to say it out loud. But this is the prayer. Jesus, I surrender everything I am to you. I give you my doubts. I give you my hope. I give you everything, Lord. And I know I look good sometimes on the outside, but I'm faking it. I need you. Or I've been hurt by people. God, bring me healing. And let me know that it's not about those people, but it's about you, Jesus. And I pray that, God, as I walk out of this room, that I walk out a changed person. I know my circumstances aren't going to change immediately, but I know right now I can change because I can stop doubting and I can believe. Thank you, Father. In your name we pray. Amen.